What a turn of events. After a long-standing controversy about missing funds, it turns out the money was never gone. It was just there. Tiffany, the supervisor at the heart of the scandal, steps down. Then, almost immediately, her replacement. Napoleon finds a pile of cash, and suddenly, raises are being handed out, and the budget is crystal clear. The narrator sees the irony in this situation. He claims that Napoleon is just doing the same thing. Tiffany was criticized for shuffling numbers and rubber-stamping budgets, but with a cleaner delivery. He calls Napoleon out, saying he's not a leader of a new era, but is simply remixing Tiffany's greatest hits. He believes Napoleon's claim to transparency is a farce, as the shadows are still moving behind the curtain. The focus then shifts to a meeting at Thornton Township. The narrator says the board was predictably defensive, but what truly caught his attention were the comments from the residents. They provided a mix of comedy and chaos. However, one voice stood out. Mr. Christopher Gonzalez, the narrator, expresses a long-standing distrust of Gonzalez, whom he describes as having snake energy. He points out that Gonzalez was instrumental in Tiffany's rise to power, and his reappearance at the microphone is cause for suspicion. The narrator is particularly intrigued by a single line Gonzalez says, which he plans to unpack, examined, and dragged into the brightest spotlight possible. The narrator then contrasts Tiffany's and Napoleon's approaches to leadership. He describes Tiffany as secretive and averse to questions. Her default response to inquiries about finances was, "Why don't you just trust me?" He also brings up her policy of hiring people with criminal records, which she called second chances. The narrator, however, suggests this was a strategy to build an office of people too scared to challenge her, making her untouchable. He refers to her budgets as black holes and claims that nobody knew where money was going. With Tiffany gone, the budget is suddenly open and numbers are visible. This newfound clarity has led to raises and smarter, expanding services. The narrator speculates that maybe Tiffany wasn't a thief after all, but was just paranoid and controlling. He believes that if the money was always there, then the issue wasn't theft, but ego. He remembers Tiffany saying, "We have money," but when pressed for proof, she would snap. "I don't like your tone." The narrator clarifies that this isn't embezzlement, but arrogance. Receipts likely existed, but she just thought nobody deserved to see them. In the end, the narrator concludes that Gonzalez's statement essentially confirmed that Tiffany wasn't a thief, but was just impossible to work with. He summarizes Tiffany's downfall as a result of her pride, not corruption. This revelation changes the entire narrative, suggesting that the chaos was not due to financial misconduct, but to a deeply flawed leadership style, rooted in secrecy and arrogance. The new, open budget and expanding services under Napoleon stand as a stark contrast to Tiffany's tenure, highlighting the importance of transparency in public office. The narrator believes that this is what the people wanted all along, more with less. The return of the General Assistance Program with a math that actually makes sense is a testament to this shift. The narrator sees this as a final judgment on Tiffany's leadership, one that she herself brought on. Asterisk, 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 what a twist. The money everyone thought was gone wasn't. It was right there the whole time. Tiffany, who was getting roasted for the missing cash, steps aside. Then, as if by magic, her replacement, Napoleon, discovers a pile of money, hands out raises, and suddenly, everything is crystal clear. The speaker calls out the irony. He points out that Napoleon is doing the same things Tiffany was. Accused of padding checks, shuffling numbers, but with a cleaner delivery. He says Napoleon isn't a poster child for integrity. He's just remixing Tiffany's greatest hits and photocopying her playbook. True transparency, he argues, begins with the truth, not a shady routine with a cleaner delivery. The conversation then shifts to a Thornton Township meeting. The board was predictably defensive, but what truly stands out are the residents' comments, which were a mix of comedy and chaos. One voice in particular cuts through, Mr. Christopher Gonzalez. The speaker admits to having side-eyeing him for years, noting that Gonzalez was the one who cleared the path for Tiffany to become supervisor in the first place. The speaker is intrigued by a specific line Gonzalez drops, promising to dissect this line by line because it's not sliding under the radar. The speaker then contrasts Tiffany's and Napoleon's leadership. He says Tiffany was secretive and hated questions. Her budgets were black holes, and she demanded trust without providing receipts. She also hired a staff of ex-cons, which the speaker believes was a strategy to create an office of people too scared to challenge her. However, with Tiffany gone, the budget is open, numbers are visible, and services are expanding. The speaker speculates that perhaps Tiffany wasn't a thief, but was just paranoid and controlling. He believes the issue wasn't theft, but ego. He remembers Tiffany saying, "We have money," but when pressed for proof, she'd snap, "I don't." Like your tone, he argues. This is not embezzlement. It's arrogance. In the end, the speaker concludes that Gonzalez's statement basically confirmed that Tiffany wasn't a thief, but was just impossible to work with. He says her downfall wasn't corruption. It was pride, the new, open budget, and expanding services. Under Napoleon's stand is a stark contrast to Tiffany's tenure, highlighting the importance of transparency and accountability in public office. The speaker sees the return of services like tax refunds as a positive development, but ultimately he believes this is a story about how pride, not corruption, brought about Tiffany's downfall. So here's the twist. The truth finally leaks. And guess what? The money wasn't gone. It was sitting there the whole time. Tiffany steps aside and suddenly it's, "Oh wow, look at this pile of cash we just discovered." Please, that didn't just pop out of nowhere. Napoleon was padding checks, rubber stamping budgets, and shuffling numbers like he was headlining a carnival scam. The exact moves Tiffany was getting roasted for. The wildest part, maybe Tiffany wasn't even stealing. Maybe she was just too stubborn to lay her cards on the table. Now Napoleon's looking around like, wait, so she might not have done anything? Welcome to transparency, champ. Napoleon, let's keep 100. If you want to brand yourself as transparent, start with the truth. Don't roll in acting like the poster child of integrity, when all you're doing is the same shady routine with a cleaner delivery. Talking about being translucent doesn't mean a thing if the shadows are still moving behind the curtain right now. The only thing translucent is your ego. You're not rewriting history. You're remixing Tiffany's greatest hits. Stop pretending you're leading a new era when you're just photocopying her playbook. Yo, before we go further, hit that like button. Smash subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you think, because now we gotta talk about that Thornton Township meeting. People said the board sounded defensive, but honestly that's nothing new. That crew dodges questions like it's their Olympic sport. What really hit different wasn't them. It was the residents. Folks got up, dropped lines that had me laughing, raising eyebrows, and questioning reality. Just another night of comedy and chaos in Thornton. But one voice cut through the noise. Mr. Christopher Gonzalez. And listen, something about that man's delivery has always rubbed me sideways. Maybe it's just me, but I've been citing him for years. Let's not forget, he's the one who slid Tiffany's name into the spotlight and basically cleared her path to become supervisor. That move alone had red flags waving like a marching band. Now he's back at the mic. Yeah, the snake energy is loud and clear. So he starts talking, and then he drops this one line. Had me slamming pause like, wait, did he really just say that? Nah, that's not sliding under the radar. We're dissecting this line by line, word for word, because whatever slick game he thought he was running with that statement. Oh, it's about to get unpacked, examined, and dragged into the brightest spotlight possible. Trust me, you're going to want to hear this breakdown. Roll the clip now. Let's keep it straight. Tiffany hated questions. Ask her something basic, and she glared like you just disrespected her ancestors. Her default response, "Why don't you just trust me?" Like asking for receipts was treason. And her hiring policy, filling seats with folks who had records, she called it second chances. But let's be real. When your whole staff are ex-cons, that's not compassion. That's a strategy. Build an office of people too scared to challenge you. And suddenly, you're untouchable. Then came the budgets, or at least what she called budgets. In reality, black holes. Tiffany wanted rubber stamps on papers no one ever saw. For all we knew, she was just signing Tiffany checks to Tiffany. Dumper. Receipts, no explanations, no transparency. That's how the chaos started with her secrecy. Nobody knew where money was going. Nobody knew what was real. But the moment she's gone, boom, Napoleon's handing out raises. Numbers suddenly crystal clear. So what's the real story? Are they saying Tiffany wasn't stealing after all? Maybe she wasn't corrupt, just paranoid and controlling. Because if the money was always there, untouched, then maybe this wasn't theft. It was ego. I remember Tiffany swearing, "We have money." But when people press her proof, she'd snap, "I don't like your tone. That's not embezzlement. That's arrogance." Receipts probably existed. She just thought nobody deserved to see them. Big difference. Now the budget's open. Numbers are visible. And for the first time, things are moving. Services aren't cut. They're expanding smarter. This is what people wanted all along. More with less. That's why budgets matter. Finalizing them is non-negotiable. Take general assistance. Remember Tiffany's pet project? The tax refunds? Yeah, it's back. But now it's got math that actually makes sense. Tiffany, this one's on you. Gonzalez basically stood at that mic and said, "You weren't a thief. You were just impossible to work with." And honestly, that's your story in a nutshell. Your downfall wasn't corruption, it was pride.